The rain hammered against the windows of the riverside diner as Michael Hartley stared at his untouched coffee, watching the steam rise and disappear into the cold February air. Outside, the storm that had been brewing all morning finally unleashed its fury on the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the empty parking lot where only 3 cars remained: his own rusted pickup truck, the diner owner's sedan, and a police cruiser that had been sitting there for the past hour. Detective Rebecca Collins pushed through the diner's heavy glass door, her badge catching the fluorescent light as she shook the rain from her jacket. She had driven here from the state police barracks, 30 miles, through winding mountain roads that were becoming increasingly dangerous with each passing minute. The call had come in at 2:47 p.m. A possible sighting of Danny Hartley, the boy who had vanished without a trace 8 years ago during a storm just like this one. If you're finding this story as gripping as we are, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Now, let's continue with this incredible tale that shocked an entire community. Michael looked up as Detective Collins approached his booth, her expression a mixture of professional composure and genuine sympathy. She had been a rookie patrol officer back in 2017 when 10-year-old Danny disappeared from their backyard during his birthday party. Now, as a seasoned detective, she had reopened the case 3 months ago after new evidence emerged from an unlikely source: a traffic camera in Philadelphia that had captured what appeared to be Danny, now 18, boarding a Greyhound bus. "Mr. Hartley," she said, sliding into the cracked vinyl seat across from him. "I know this is difficult, but I need to walk through what happened that day one more time. The video footage from Philadelphia has been authenticated by our tech team, and we believe it really is Danny." Michael's hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee mug. His wife Linda had refused to come to this meeting, unable to face the possibility of false hope again. They had endured 8 years of supposed sightings, false leads, and well-meaning strangers who claimed to have seen their son in grocery stores, amusement parks, and school playgrounds across 3 states. Each disappointment had carved deeper lines into their faces and driven them further apart until their marriage became a silent monument to shared grief. "The party was in full swing," Michael began, his voice barely audible above the storm outside. Linda had spent weeks planning it. Danny had invited 12 kids from his class, and our backyard was filled with balloons and decorations. The weather forecast had called for possible storms later that evening, but at 3 o'clock the sun was still shining. Detective Collins opened her notebook, though she knew the details by heart. Danny had been playing hide-and-seek with his friends when the first rumble of thunder rolled across the Pennsylvania hills. The children had been running around the large backyard of the Hartley property, a sprawling 5-acre lot that bordered the Allegheny National Forest. When the game ended and the children gathered for cake, Danny was nowhere to be found. "We searched everywhere," Michael continued, staring out at the storm. "The neighbors came, then the volunteer fire department, then your people. By midnight, we had over 200 volunteers combing through those woods with flashlights and search dogs. The storm that night was worse than this one. Visibility was near zero, and the dogs lost his scent at Miller Creek." The initial investigation had been thorough but frustrating. Danny had simply vanished during a 15-minute window when the adults were inside preparing the birthday cake and the children were playing unsupervised in the backyard. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, and no physical evidence beyond his red baseball cap found hanging on a branch near the creek, almost a mile from the house. Detective Collins had studied every aspect of the case. The Hartley family had no enemies, no financial troubles, and no history of domestic violence. Michael worked as a maintenance supervisor at the local paper mill, and Linda taught second grade at Millbrook Elementary. They were active in their church, involved in community events, and by all accounts devoted parents to Danny and his younger sister Amy, who was now 15 and carried the weight of being the child who survived. Mr. Hartley, the reason I asked you here today is because we've made significant progress. The young man in the Philadelphia footage isn't just similar to how Danny might look now. Our facial recognition software shows a 94.7% probability match. More importantly, we've traced his movements before and after that bus station. Michael's eyes widened as Detective Collins pulled out a manila folder containing several photographs. The images showed a tall, lean young man with dark hair and familiar green eyes, wearing jeans and a blue jacket. Despite the years that had passed, the resemblance to Danny was unmistakable. The same slightly crooked smile, the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. He was living in a group home in Philadelphia under the name David Harper, she explained. According to the facility's records, he was brought there 8 years ago by a woman named Janet Morrison, who claimed to be his aunt and said his parents had died in a car accident. The staff there described him as quiet, intelligent, but suffering from what appeared to be selective amnesia about his early childhood. The detective paused as lightning illuminated the diner, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that shook the building. She watched Michael's face carefully, knowing that this information would bring both hope and agonizing questions about the 8 years they had lost. Janet Morrison doesn't exist, she continued. The social security number she used was stolen from a deceased woman in Ohio. The address she gave was false, and after she left Danny at the group home, she disappeared completely. We believe she was working with someone. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping, Mr. Hartley. This was planned, and Danny was specifically targeted. Michael felt the room spinning around him as the implications sank in. Someone had deliberately taken his son, created a false identity for him, and abandoned him in a city 300 miles away. The woman who had stolen 8 years of Danny's childhood, 8 years of their family's life, was still out there somewhere. "Where is he now?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. "Where is my son?" Detective Collins reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "That's what we're trying to determine. 3 days ago, David, left the group home voluntarily. He's 18 now, legally an adult, and he has the right to leave. But here's what's interesting. According to the staff, he had been asking questions about his past for months. Someone had been sending him letters. The investigation had revealed that over the past 6 months, Danny had received 11 letters, postmarked from different cities across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. The group home had a policy of screening mail for residents under 18, but they had stopped monitoring Danny's correspondence when he turned 18 in October. The letters had no return address, and the handwriting analysis was still pending, but the content was disturbing. The letters contained fragments of information about his real identity, Detective Collins explained. Whoever was writing them knew details about his disappearance that were never released to the public. Specific details about the birthday party, the red baseball cap, even the exact time he went missing. But instead of revealing everything at once, they were feeding him information gradually, almost like they were preparing him for something. Michael's mind raced as he tried to process this revelation. Someone who knew the truth about Danny's disappearance had been in contact with him, manipulating him from a distance. The timing couldn't be coincidental. The letters had started arriving just as Danny reached the age where he could legally leave the group home and make his own decisions. "We believe Danny is trying to come home," Detective Collins said. "The bus he boarded in Philadelphia was headed toward Pittsburgh, and from there are direct connections to towns throughout western Pennsylvania, including here. But Mr. Hartley, we need to consider the possibility that he's not alone, that whoever took him 8 years ago is still involved in his life." The storm outside was reaching its peak intensity, and the diner's lights flickered ominously. Michael thought about Linda at home, probably standing at the kitchen window, watching for his headlights, the same way she had watched for Danny every day for 8 years. Amy would be in her room, pretending to do homework while actually researching missing children cases online, a habit she had developed that both worried and broke their hearts. "There's something else," Detective Collins said, lowering her voice. "Yesterday morning, we received a call from a truck driver who stops at a rest area about 60 miles north of here. He says a young man matching Danny's description approached his cab around dawn, asking for directions to Millbrook. The description matches perfectly: the green eyes, the scar on his left hand from when he fell off his bike as a child." Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. Danny was close, maybe within hours of coming home, but the circumstances surrounding his return were raising more questions than answers. Why now? Why hadn't whoever was sending the letters simply told him the truth from the beginning? And most importantly, what did they want? The detective's radio crackled to life, and she listened intently to the dispatcher's voice. Her expression grew grave as she received the information, and she looked at Michael with a mixture of urgency and concern. "Mr. Hartley, I need to get you home immediately. We just received word that there's been activity at your house. Someone was seen in your backyard about 20 minutes ago. It could be Danny, but we can't take any chances given the circumstances." As they prepared to leave the diner and venture back into the storm, Michael felt a strange combination of terror and hope coursing through his veins. After 8 years of searching, of wondering, of slowly losing pieces of himself to grief and unanswered questions, his son might finally be coming home. But the mystery surrounding Danny's disappearance had only deepened, and the danger that had taken him away might still be lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. The drive back to the Hartley house took nearly an hour through the treacherous storm conditions. Detective Collins followed Michael's pickup truck in her cruiser, her radio alive with communications from other units that were converging on the area. The Pennsylvania State Police had issued an alert for Danny's description, but they were treating this as a potential rescue operation complicated by unknown threats. As they turned onto Maple Ridge Road, where the Hartley family had lived for 15 years, Michael's headlights illuminated a figure standing at the edge of their driveway. Even through the rain and darkness, he recognized the silhouette immediately, taller now, broader in the shoulders, but unmistakably his son. Danny stood motionless in the storm, his clothes soaked through, staring at the house where he had celebrated his 10th birthday 8 years ago. Michael slammed on his brakes and leaped from his truck before Detective Collins could stop him. Father and son faced each other across 20 feet of rain-soaked asphalt, 8 years of separation hanging between them like an invisible wall. Danny's face was gaunt, his green eyes haunted by experiences that Michael could only imagine, but there was recognition there, confused and fragmented, but real. "Dad?" Danny's voice was barely audible above the storm, uncertain and trembling. I think I remember you." The front door of the house burst open, and Linda appeared in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth in shock and disbelief. Behind her, Amy pushed past, her 15-year-old face a mirror of the 10-year-old brother she had lost, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stared at the young man who had haunted their family's dreams for nearly a decade. Detective Collins approached cautiously, her hand near her service weapon, scanning the dark woods that surrounded the property. The reunion she was witnessing was everything the Hartley family had prayed for, but her instincts told her that they were not alone. Someone had orchestrated Danny's return, and until she understood their motives, everyone was in danger. "Danny!" she called out, her voice firm but gentle. "I'm Detective Collins with the Pennsylvania State Police. Can you tell me how you got here?" Danny turned toward her, his expression confused and troubled. There were letters. Someone kept writing to me, telling me things about this place, about you, he said, looking back at Michael. They said I needed to come home before it was too late, that someone was coming for our family. The words sent a chill through Detective Collins that had nothing to do with the storm. She had suspected that Danny's return was part of a larger plan, but hearing him speak about threats against the family confirmed her worst fears. Whoever had taken Danny 8 years ago wasn't finished with the Hartleys. "Did you see who sent the letters?" she pressed. "Did anyone contact you besides through the mail?" Danny shook his head slowly, water dripping from his dark hair. "No, but yesterday, at the bus station in Philadelphia, there was a woman. She was watching me, following me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. When I got on the bus, she got on too, but she got off at the first stop." Linda had moved closer, her maternal instincts overriding her caution as she reached toward the son she had thought she might never see again. "Danny, sweetheart, you're home now. You're safe. Whatever happened, whatever they did to you, it's over." But Detective Collins knew it wasn't over. The pattern was too deliberate, too calculated. Someone had kept Danny alive and relatively safe for 8 years, had fed him information about his real identity, and had guided him back to his family at this specific moment. The question was why, and what they planned to do next. Her radio crackled with an urgent message from the units stationed around the perimeter. "Detective Collins, we've got movement in the woods behind the house. At least 2 individuals approaching from the northeast." The detective drew her weapon and motioned for the family to get inside the house immediately. "Everyone inside now. Danny, stay close to your parents." As they rushed toward the front door, Detective Collins caught a glimpse of movement in her peripheral vision. A figure emerged from the tree line near the spot where Danny's baseball cap had been found 8 years ago. The person was wearing dark clothing and moved with purpose, heading directly toward the house. "This is Detective Collins, requesting immediate backup at 247 Maple Ridge Road." She spoke rapidly into her radio. "We have civilians in danger and at least 2 suspects approaching the residence." Inside the house, Linda wrapped her arms around Danny, 8 years of grief and longing pouring out as she held her son close. Amy stood nearby, afraid to touch him, afraid he might disappear again if she got too close. Michael positioned himself by the window, trying to see through the storm, while Detective Collins secured the front door. "Danny," the detective said urgently, "I need you to think carefully. In the letters you received, did anyone mention names? Did they give you any indication of why they took you?" Danny's face contorted with the effort of remembering, fragments of suppressed memories fighting to surface. "There was something about a debt," he said slowly. "Someone my father owed money to, but that doesn't make sense. The woman, Janet, the one who brought me to the group home, she used to visit sometimes when I was younger. She would ask me questions about what I remembered, and when I couldn't answer, she seemed relieved." Michael felt his blood run cold. He had never owed money to anyone, had never been involved in anything that could have put his family in danger. But as Danny spoke, a long-buried memory began to surface, something from his past that he had thought was completely unrelated to his son's disappearance. The lights in the house suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. Detective Collins immediately moved to the window, using the storm's illumination to scan the yard for movement. Her backup units were still minutes away, and she could hear footsteps on the front porch. "Michael," she whispered urgently, "is there another way out of this house?" Before he could answer, there was a knock at the front door, slow, deliberate, and somehow more terrifying than if someone had tried to break it down. A woman's voice called out through the storm, calm and eerily familiar. "Michael Hartley, I know you're in there. I know Danny made it home safely. It's time we finished what we started 8 years ago." Danny's entire body went rigid at the sound of the voice. "That's her," he whispered, terror evident in his tone. "That's Janet, the woman who took me." Detective Collins positioned herself between the family and the door, her weapon drawn and ready. Through her radio, she could hear that backup units were less than 2 minutes away, but she knew that might be too long. Whatever Janet Morrison wanted, she had waited 8 years to get it, and she wasn't going to let the police stop her now. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, followed by the voice that had haunted Danny's nightmares for years. "Michael, you have something that belongs to me, something you took from my family 20 years ago. I gave you 8 years to figure out what it was, 8 years to make it right, but you never even tried to find the truth, did you?" Michael's mind raced as he tried to understand what she was talking about. 20 years ago, he would have been in his early 20s, working at the paper mill and trying to build a life with Linda. He couldn't think of anything he had done that could have justified the kidnapping of his child. But then, like a bolt of lightning illuminating a dark landscape, the memory hit him. 20 years ago, there had been an accident at the mill, a safety violation that had resulted in the death of a young worker named David Morrison. Michael had been the supervisor who had signed off on the equipment inspection that day, the inspection that had missed a critical failure in the machinery. The official investigation had cleared him of wrongdoing, determining that the equipment failure was due to a manufacturing defect that couldn't have been detected during routine inspections. But the dead man's family, his wife and young daughter, had blamed Michael, had accused him of cutting corners to save money, of being responsible for David Morrison's death. The wife had been named Janet Morrison, and she had a daughter who would be about Danny's age now. "Oh God," Michael whispered, the full horror of the situation finally becoming clear. She didn't take Danny for ransom or revenge. She took him to replace her own child, the daughter who lost her father because of what she thinks I did. Detective Collins felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. This wasn't a simple kidnapping, it was a twisted attempt at justice, a mother's desperate effort to balance what she saw as a cosmic debt. Janet Morrison had taken Danny to raise as her own child, to replace what she believed Michael had stolen from her family. "Mrs. Morrison," Detective Collins called out through the door, "this is the Pennsylvania State Police. I know you're grieving, and I know you believe Michael wronged your family, but taking Danny won't bring your husband back. Let's talk about this." There was silence for a long moment, broken only by the storm and the distant sound of approaching sirens. When Janet Morrison spoke again, her voice had changed, less controlled, more desperate. "You don't understand," she said, and they could hear her crying now. "I lost everything when David died. My daughter Sarah blamed me for not fighting harder, for not making Michael pay for what he did. She ran away when she was 16, and I never saw her again. When I took Danny, I thought I could have my family back, that I could be the mother I should have been." Detective Collins could see the flashing lights of the backup units coming up Maple Ridge Road, but she also knew that cornered people in emotional crisis were the most dangerous. "Mrs. Morrison, where is Sarah now? Is she here with you?" The admission came in a broken whisper that they could barely hear through the storm. "Sarah died 3 years ago, drug overdose in a Philadelphia shelter. She never forgave me for letting her father's death go unpunished. When she died, I realized that taking Danny hadn't fixed anything. It had just created more pain, more broken families." Danny stepped forward, despite his parents' attempts to hold him back. "Janet," he called out, his voice stronger now. "I know you tried to take care of me. I know you were hurting, but this isn't the way to honor your husband's memory or your daughter's." The front door opened slowly, and Janet Morrison stepped into view. She was a small woman in her 50s, her grey hair plastered to her head by the rain, her clothes soaked through. In her hands, she held an old photograph of her family, herself, her husband David, and a young girl who looked remarkably like Amy. "I'm sorry," she said, looking directly at Danny. "I'm so sorry for what I took from you, from all of you. I just I couldn't let go of the anger, and it poisoned everything I touched. Detective Collins kept her weapon trained on Janet, but could see that the woman posed no immediate physical threat. The backup units had arrived, and officers were taking positions around the house, but the real drama was playing out in the emotional space between a broken woman and the family she had torn apart. Michael stepped forward, his voice heavy with 20 years of guilt he had carried without fully understanding why. "Mrs. Morrison, Janet, I am so sorry about what happened to David. I've replayed that day 1,000 times, wondering if I could have done something different, something that might have prevented the accident. I know the official investigation cleared me, but that doesn't mean I don't bear some responsibility for what happened." Linda moved to stand beside her husband, her arm around Danny's shoulders, while Amy watched from the safety of the hallway. The family that had been shattered 8 years ago was finally together again, but the moment was overshadowed by the presence of the woman whose own family had been destroyed decades earlier. The equipment manufacturer eventually recalled that entire line of machinery, Michael continued. 7 other workers died in similar accidents across the country. If I had known, if there had been any way to predict what would happen, I would have shut down that line immediately. Your husband's death has haunted me for 20 years. Janet Morrison looked at the photograph in her hands, then at the family standing before her. David always said that accidents happen, that the mill was dangerous work, but someone had to do it. He never blamed anyone for the risks. It was me. I was the one who needed someone to blame, someone to hate. And when Sarah left, when she died, I realized that my anger hadn't brought David back or saved my daughter. It had just created more victims. The police officers moved in slowly, but Janet Morrison made no attempt to resist or flee. She carefully placed the photograph on a table near the door and extended her hands to be cuffed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of 8 years of guilt and grief. "Danny," she said, looking at the young man she had raised as her own child. "I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope you can find a way to heal from what I did to you and your family." Danny looked at the woman who had stolen his childhood, but had also, in her twisted way, tried to love him. "I forgive you, Janet. I understand why you did it, even if it was wrong. But now, I need to learn how to be part of this family again." As Janet Morrison was led away by the police officers, Detective Collins finally holstered her weapon and turned to the reunited family. The immediate danger had passed, but she knew that the real work of healing was just beginning. Danny would need extensive counseling to deal with his fragmented memories and the trauma of his abduction. The family would need therapy to learn how to be together again after 8 years of grief and separation. "Mr. Hartley," she said, "we'll need Danny to come to the station tomorrow to give a full statement, but tonight I think you all need to just be together as a family." Michael nodded, his arm around his son's shoulders, feeling the solid reality of Danny's presence after so many years of wondering and hoping. Linda was crying. Tears of joy mixed with grief for all the lost years, all the birthdays and holidays and everyday moments they could never recover. Amy, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally approached her brother. "Do you remember me at all?" she asked quietly. Danny looked at his sister, studying her face with the intensity of someone trying to recall a half-remembered dream. "I remember a little girl with pigtails who used to follow me around. She had a stuffed elephant named Peanut." Amy's face lit up with surprised laughter. "You do remember! Peanut is still in my room. I never could bring myself to put him away." As the police finished their work and the storm finally began to subside, the Hartley family sat together in their living room, sharing stories and trying to bridge the gap that 8 years had created. Danny told them about his life in Philadelphia, about the group home and the friends he had made, about the dreams and fragments of memories that had always told him he belonged somewhere else. Michael and Linda shared what their lives had been like without him, the search efforts that had gradually wound down, the support groups for families of missing children, the way Amy had grown up carrying the weight of being the child who had survived. They talked about the guilt they had carried, wondering if they had failed to protect him, if they should have done something differently on that terrible day 8 years ago. Detective Collins made her final report as dawn broke over Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The case of Danny Hartley's disappearance was officially closed, but the story of his family's recovery was just beginning. Janet Morrison would face federal kidnapping charges, but she would also receive the mental health treatment she desperately needed. In the weeks that followed, Danny slowly began to remember more details about his early childhood, helped by family photos and stories and the gradual return of suppressed memories. He enrolled in community college, determined to catch up on the education he had missed, and began seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. The Hartley family started attending counseling sessions together, learning how to communicate about the pain they had all endured and the hope they now shared. Amy, who had spent 8 years feeling invisible in the shadow of her missing brother, discovered that Danny was genuinely interested in getting to know the person she had become. Michael returned to his job at the paper mill with a new perspective on life and responsibility. He established a safety foundation in David Morrison's memory, dedicating his efforts to preventing the kind of workplace accidents that had started the tragic chain of events decades earlier. Linda went back to teaching with renewed purpose, knowing firsthand how precious and fragile families could be. She became an advocate for missing children's families, using her experience to help other parents navigate the impossible terrain of hope and despair. On Danny's 19th birthday, the first they had celebrated together in 9 years, the family gathered in the same backyard where he had disappeared. The decorations were simple, the guest list small, but the joy was profound and genuine. As they sat around the picnic table, sharing cake and watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, they had no fear of the approaching weather. They had survived the worst storm of their lives, and they had found their way back to each other. The scars would always remain, in Danny's fractured memories, in the years they could never recover, in the knowledge of how quickly everything could change. But they were together now, and that was enough. That was everything. The mystery of Danny Hartley's disappearance had been solved, but the greater mystery, how a family finds the strength to forgive, to heal, and to love again, would continue to unfold for years to come. In the end, it wasn't the storm that had taken Danny away or brought him home. It was the enduring power of family, the persistence of love, and the possibility of redemption, even in the darkest circumstances. As the first raindrops began to fall on that 19th birthday celebration, the Hartley family simply moved the party inside, laughing and talking and creating new memories to replace the ones that had been lost. The storm would pass, as all storms do, but they would face it together.